Okay. Let's go here. And lovely recording. All right. Fabulous. Lovely to see you here, Diane.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Awesome. Everyone, welcome to the show today. I'm 𝙼𝙗𝙤𝙪. Welcome to Master Your Life, the show of insight, intelligence, and inspiration, where I ask you each episode to consider who is it you are right now and who is it that you would most like to be? What kind of character are you striving to develop? What kind of life would you really love to live? And these are important questions, especially in this day and age and at this precious time. And I'm just absolutely delighted to be joined by somebody who can help us to develop those questions more thoroughly and understand why we might behave the way that we behave and how we could reconsider course correcting on our lives. So my beautiful guest today is Diane Bederman. Diane, welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
So Diane, maybe just give us a little background. I mean, I usually give the primer for people, but you've got a pretty extensive background. So tell us about you.
About me.
Yes, about you.
I'm a hospital trained chaplain. I went into that because I knew I wanted to help people. I'm a fixer, but I knew it didn't want it to be anything from the psychological perspective, and I didn't want to be a doctor. And I realized that some of the greatest help you can get is from clergy, from your religious values. For me, it saved my life when I was very ill and I was suicidal. It was a rabbi who saved me because he told me to study the Bible, and I opened it up, and there it was, Deuteronomy. I give to you today the blessing and the curse, life and death, choose life. And that's been what I've always chosen now, that whenever things get really difficult or really down, I must choose to live, because you cannot honor God from the grave. I am a mother of 3. I am a grandmother of 9. So I'm hopeful that what I've written to the world in my books will be my ethical will to my children and grandchildren. I have a blog that I write about ethics, religion, spirituality, politics, and mental illness. And then I live in a place I call the Garden of Eden in Ontario. I'll repeat that because I just swallowed that. The Garden of Eden in Ontario.
In Ontario. There you go, folks. So if you're thinking it's only in Bali, it is not. But I can tell you, I'm looking at my nose today and going, wow, my nose is still red because I was out shoveling snow. I live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And it's like, yes, it's a little cold. So today, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And there's lots more that Diane could say about her life experience. That's why I always get some guests to introduce themselves, because but by reading somebody's bio, you really don't necessarily get who they are and where they are in their life right now at this present time. And you've written this book we're going to talk a bit about today, which is Back to the Ethic, but you've got lots of other works too. So what I'd like to do is I'll just show people who are watching, they can see the cover of this beautiful book. There we go. So if you're looking for this book on Amazon, you'll be able to do that and recognize it by the beautiful artwork there. And so, Diane, this book was about reclaiming Western values. And what are Western values and how is that different than the rest of the world? Can we just kind of start with that?
That's probably the largest question, biggest question I could be asked. The Judeo-Christian ethic came out to us 3,500 years ago in the desert, when God gave it to the Jewish people in the desert, because it was meant to be for all people for all time. This was an extraordinary ethic and remains extraordinary because it was the first time that we were ever taught that all people are born with equal intrinsic value. All life is sacred and we have free will. And it was those 3 concepts that made it to America when the Puritans left Europe and decided they wanted to have a community where people were free. The Judeo-Christian ethic is the only ethic that promotes freedom because of its statement of the value of human life and free will. Now, I don't know if we were born with free will. I don't know if all people are born with equal intrinsic value, but that is the ethic that we chose for America and for the West. Now, the difference between the Judeo-Christian ethic and, let's say, the ethic that runs China, Russia, all Muslim countries, is that they do not believe that all people are born with equal intrinsic value. People are born into their fate. That is, you are the object of life. You can't change it. You can't control it. It's like being a hamster in a wheel. You have no say in it. You just live it. And these are countries whose basic ethic declares some people more valuable than others. Often women have no value at all. In India, in the Hindu system, there is a belief that the 𝙠𝙞𝙩𝙩𝙩, these are the people that are the lowest of the low, girls being the lowest, they have no value at all. They survive by living in garbage, off garbage. Mm-hmm. When you have an ethic like that, you cannot develop yourself. You cannot be what Rabbi Sachs, may he rest in peace, wrote, that we are the subject of our destiny. We are given opportunities, we make decisions, we make some lousy decisions, but the idea is that you can repent, go back and make a different decision and raise yourself up to be the best you can be. Now that's a concept of, that's perfection, that the ethics that God gave and the 10 Commandments were to help us be compassionate people in a compassionate society. But human beings are not perfect. I don't see perfection for many millennia coming down the way, but it's an ideal to which we aspire. And I find it upsetting today that we have so much division in our countries, in our world, where people are claiming that, that people are complaining that they're not 100% equal. Well, right. It started off that no one was equal. And then if we look to America, because that seems to be in the paper these days, with racism, 50 years ago, Black people were far worse off than they are today. Are people all equal? Is everyone being treated equally? No, but we are moving on a path towards the concept all people are born with equal intrinsic value. There is no other ethic anywhere in the world where you can go and live and become equal to anyone else. You're not allowed.
Right. And so, and that means, because I want to dive in a little bit deeper, because especially Canadians and people in North America in general don't really have a concept of what this really means when people are not valued at all, and they are looked at actually even worse than cattle or livestock. And
right.
So really it's the disposal, this disposal idea of human beings, where they're disposed of as if they have zero value. And that's migrated a little bit over here in terms of abortions, which is an absolute costing of life. But in China, that babies are baby girls. There was a one world China policy that was just lifted in 2015. Is that correct? 2015?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was just changed in 2015. So that's just a short 5 years ago.
Right.
But girls and boys. So with this one child policy, babies were abandoned. Babies were, left in markets and just to die, not by one or two a day, but by the hundreds of thousands. These children were.
But you could only do that if you're raised in a culture that tells you year after year that you're not valuable.
Right.
And yet here in the West, what people don't understand is we have this ethic that tells you all the time you are valuable. We don't talk about that ethic anymore. Right. We don't teach it in the schools anymore. I would suggest that more than 50% of people in Canada and America have no idea where their freedom comes from. They have no clue. And if you don't know where it comes from, how do you protect it? And we have people attacking religion, but it was from Judaism and Christianity that we got the freedom. So if you attack the religion, you're attacking the ethic that makes it possible for you to say, I'm equal to you. I am no different from you. All our lives are sacred. All life is sacred. And we might not act that way, but the point is, this is the only ethic that demands it of us. And also, it's a gift to us. We are given this gift that you are told that you are the subject of your life. Mm-hmm. Whereas in many other cultures, you're not. Things happen to you, too bad. That's the way it goes. The other thing, too, that the Jewish ethic gave is that it taught us that time, rather than being circular or cyclical, so that you are that hamster in the wheel, the time has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when you understand that, then you realize that you as a human being have an important part to play. Every human being, whatever we do, will take what we were given and bring it into the future. We bring our past into the future to see what we have accomplished and how much better we can be. And that only an ethic that believes in linear time makes you as a human being important. And now we're watching cancel culture, which is trying to wipe out the past. People were evil. They weren't perfect. John A. MacDonald was terrible. Lincoln was awful. If you remove all these people from the past, then how do you know what forward means? How do you know that you're not repeating the past? You wiped it out. And that's where we are today. We are wiping out again the Judeo-Christian ethic that underpins Western countries. So the question is why? Well, because if you wipe that out, anarchy and tyranny are very easy to impose.
And who benefits from anarchy and tyranny?
You know, I've been trying to figure that out. Like, who is the one guy? You know, who is it? So you can name people. You'll be very wealthy. Well, yeah, okay. And what are you going to do with all that wealth when everybody else is a servant and can't participate? What are you going to do with all your wealth and all your power? And that's a question I've been asking for the longest time. Mm-hmm. So these people who are busy trying to destroy democracy, to be a tyrant like China, what do you gain out of that? You get 8 people, and what's the rest of the world supposed to do? So that to me is the best question ever asked, and I'm waiting for an answer. I don't have it.
Right. Well, the interview's over. Just kidding. Next. or
on that one, maybe he'll speak to us again if he isn't weeping over what we're doing.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes. I don't know. I think that God's like us, probably, you know, and looking at the past and going, "Hey, how do we improve this? Like, what have I learned from all this stuff?" But these are important distinctions, Diane. I always encourage people when they're listening to the show to make sure you've got your paper and pen out, and so that you're taking some notes about this, because it is important to kind of, especially one fundamental question I think that might bridge things for people is, can a person have ethics? Because I know a lot of people, as soon as you say religion, they go, their hackles come up because God's been so, just everything's been so Jimmy Bakered. You know, it's just like people have like, it's the snake oil salesman. It's like, so people are very resistant about religion. So I look for the bridges and I go, so is there a way to be ethical without being religious? Number one.
I'm glad you asked that, because my initial theory on that, and I wrote that in the book, is that the ethic came from God, religion, but I said you could separate the ethic from God for people who don't believe in religion. You just look at the ethic itself and you ask yourself, is this a reasonable ethic? Immanuel Kant, who was a secular ethicist, didn't like religion at all, agreed that this ethic is the best ethic when he said, the categorical imperative. If it's good for one, it should be good for all. So he looked at abortion and he said, so if we abort, is that good for everyone? Well, no. How could it be good if you're aborting the next generation? And then he looked at suicide. Is suicide good? Well, if we encourage suicide, we're killing ourselves off. So he showed that the all life is sacred is a secular ethic as well. So he proved to us that the teachings of God are secular as well. And then I bumped into an 18-year-old who looked at me and said, that's really wrong.
Oh,
He said to me, I really admired him. He said, if you don't have an absolute person, something absolute that says to you, this is the ethic, then you have the ability to tear it down because it wasn't given as an absolute. So if you take God away, you can start nibbling away at the ethic. He's right. But if you don't believe in God, but you want an ethic that will help you to be a compassionate person in a compassionate society, then I suggest you read the Bible, not necessarily for some kind of a belief in God, but an understanding how to be the best human being you can be. Because that book is a book of stories teaching you how to be better. I mean, when Cain killed Abel, I mean, the Bible starts off pretty bad right away. You got fratricide. But we learned from that. Every story in the Bible, every book teaches you something about how to live. And I'd like to give the one that I think is most important for today, and that's fear of freedom. I think people are very afraid today, and they're not even sure what it is they're afraid of, but they are silencing themselves in that fear. So God takes all these people, gets them out of Egypt, moves them into the desert. I'm sorry for this. I have allergies, and it's a really good day for me. I think I'm sitting in a bit of dust. And he brought them into freedom in the desert. You're free. What's the first thing that happens? I think I want to go back. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to cook or find food. Where am I going to sleep? Who's going to take care of me? There is an innate need to want to be taken care of, to go back to the womb, to go back to the garden, because decision-making is difficult and freedom is difficult. Freedom requires that you get information and that you think. And people don't want to do that today, especially with COVID. I would suggest, especially with COVID, excuse me.
it's okay. So they didn't want to think back then, but they had to. So, but a lot of people died, right?
God said to them, I'll take care of you until you lose your fear. So it took 2 generations of people to die, people who were not associated with slavery, before they could go, hopefully, without fear into that new land and into that new world. That's how strong fear is. It took 2 generations to die before people were no longer afraid. So what are we going to do now with fear?
And so how's it crept in, Diane? Because, here there wasn't, I would say people weren't fearful, and that the fear has crept in over a span of the last 50 or 60 years. But have we had a time when we've been fearless and really in control, or, mostly fearless and not feeling at the mercy of?
I wonder if it was after the Second World War.
Yeah.
I often wonder, after the horror of the war, the Depression, it was a really bad, sad time, and everyone came together and worked together. We've become a people of entitlement. My teachers called us people with grandiose, infantile delusions of entitlement. And then you see people like that today who feel that they deserve everything and everything should be free. I shouldn't have to work for anything. Well, if everything is free, what's the point of getting up in the morning? What is your purpose in life if everything is free for you? And how do you grow if everything is free? And the only thing that isn't free is freedom.
Yeah, it's a complex issue for people who've never had. If there's multi-generations of people who have had great jobs or decent income, or, middle class, and have had opportunities to go to school and all of that. And as it's stripped away, people are almost paralyzed. It's like there's this, the fight, flight, or dissociate.
Right.
Have just completely dissociated from what's actually going on and lost their sentient internal wisdom and their connection to God. Maybe let's just loop back to your point here, though, but 50% of people don't even know that they have a connection to God. So how did that happen? How did we get so disconnected?
I think we stopped teaching the ethic in school. When I went to school, we read the Bible every day, and not for a religious point of view, at least not for me.
Right.
It was the stories. What did I learn from this? It was a book of stories, and it's a book of ethics. And they have books on ethics everywhere, but nobody talks about the Bible as the #1 book of ethics, which is why I wrote the book, to point out that we've gone astray. We left that ethic behind. We don't know why we are all equal. We don't know why all life is sacred. We don't know why we have freedom. We don't know why we need to protect freedom, because we don't talk about it anymore. It's gone. It's like you learned it from osmosis. But if you can't say, where did your freedom come from? How can you protect it? So I'd love to know where do people think their freedom comes from? Because if they think it's the government, it isn't. We're the ones that put people into power, but we can't let people in power become God.
Right. And even the idea that they're in power, quote unquote, is a funny construct, right? Too, because they're not. If you actually put it on the, they should be the most disempowered people. They should just be kind of looked at as the people who are serving the needs of the people. If they actually had the proper placement, as opposed to that's some sort of esteemed, more esteemed than everything else.
Well, we have something called the social contract, which Rousseau wrote about. These are things that we agree upon right away to live in a society. And what we gave to government was the power to implement the ethic that we gave them, the right that we gave them. These are our freedoms. You must protect them. I'm not seeing government protecting my freedom anymore. As we live now through COVID, I'm watching government attack our freedom. And I find that really frightening, because the damage done from these rules that are coming out of one person or a group of people, many of whom I never voted for, are destroying our community. They're destroying the family. The attack, the lockdowns, the cure for COVID, I think down the road, we're going to look and see it was worse than COVID itself, because we've destroyed family, the smallest unit of authority. We've destroyed the connection we have to our community, to our neighbors. We've destroyed our affection for our small businesses in small towns. I know this is hard for people to believe on the two coasts, but a lot of us live in between. We live in small towns. We rely on each other. We care for each other. We know our neighbors. We bring food when they're ill. We're well connected. But the government, with its policies of locking us in our homes, keeping us away from our parents and our grandparents, I think will be the most destructive thing to happen in the 21st century. And we're only at the second decade. And then I watched as they told us, you cannot go and visit the elderly as they die. How do you do that? How do you isolate our parents and grandparents when you tell us in the next breath that we care about them? How can you care about elderly people if you lock them away in a room where on a year?
Yes. And people, and I agree with you. I've been talking the same talk since March, because when people started abandoning their parents in long-term care and watching them die alone, I went, what is wrong with us that we would do this thing, this horrible horror of complete inhumanity? And it is fear-based. It's like fear of the government, fear of public officials, fear, and people are very quick to get into confrontations with people who want to go against this narrative. And it is a big story. It's a story, a constructed story of how we should be separated from one another, but it's completely inhuman. And so old people now are opting for euthanasia as opposed to going through a lockdown again. They're opting for
I am adamantly opposed to a government assisting anyone in dying. I used to believe in capital punishment, and then it dawned on me, no, you do make mistakes, but more than that, government should never be involved in killing people. because then they just start to get more involved with killing more. So we fight to prevent young people from committing suicide. We
Yes.
spend effort and time. And then when you're older, we'll say, well, we'll help you kill yourself because you're in pain. Well, if you're in pain, there's something called morphine, if you're in physical pain. And our doctors should give us morphine with the knowledge that you could die from an overdose of morphine. But that's my choice. It's not like I'm asking you to shoot me up with what we call blue juice at the vet. And then you start teaching older people to think. I mean, how many generations do you think it will take before I'm a burden? I don't want to be a burden. My mother died when she was 90, but near the end, she was worried about being a burden. And so I laughed. I said, well, sort of, we are. I mean, I'm driving you everywhere. I'm taking you places. Yeah. I joked with her. I said, but then again, Mom, I was a burden when you raised me. You took me on and cared for me. You raised me. So how do you not return that love to your parent and say, well, yeah, Mom, today you're driving me crazy. But then my mother told me I drove her crazy when I was a child. But when we start to encourage older people to believe they are a burden, to believe that they have no value, that it would be better for everyone if they died. Well, that's what it is when you're suicidal. Mm-hmm. People who are suicidal, because I've been there, believe in their heart of heart that the world would be a better place if they weren't there. They know that dead is better. That's called mental illness. Mm-hmm. And yet we're encouraging older people to consider taking their own life because they're in pain, rather than aiding the pain and giving them a reason to live.
Mm-hmm. And I can speak into this also, Diane, because in our family, we have Huntington's disease, which is And so we've got, generations of people who are dealing with very serious, either can be mentally, mental challenges or, psychiatric problems or, really lovely movement disorder, which looks like you're smashed, like drunk, or like you've got the best dance skills in the world. And so my dad's still at home. He's 82 and my mom is his, companion and loves him and they love each other. And she said, because we were worried about this, concerned for the burden of it all. And she goes, what? Your dad's a piece of cake. You guys, on the other hand, are a pain. No, she didn't say that, but I'm laughing and lightning because it's this, but her ethic is like, she is a woman of faith, as you would call it, very much. And so is my father. So they will pray about, if there's mental health challenges, they pray about it. Like that's their go-to.
I think what we have to discuss as a country, as a society, is what ethical system are we going to use to have a discussion? Because if you're using one ethical system of entitlement or self-regarding, where you believe that everything you do is only about you and doesn't affect other people, your conclusion to a problem will be different from the one that I value, which is all life is sacred and all people are born with equal intrinsic value. When you have discussions about end of life or abortion or COVID, it all is based on what ethic are we using to have this discussion. And I can't think of a better, more humane, more human ethic than the one that came to us in the Bible about life. And if we do not all agree on that, then I don't know how we have discussions. When someone said to me, I remember having a discussion with someone who was on a radio show, and it ended up with him suggesting that abortion is a self-regarding thing. It's only about a woman and her choice. And my answer is, well, I don't think so. I think there's the right of the fetus, the right of the mother, the right of the father. We never talk about the father. I mean, he only has rights. He only has responsibilities. If a woman gets pregnant, she can take him to court for child support, even though he didn't want to be a father. But if he wants to be a father, he has no say in whether the child is born. I'm not going to be all for abortion or all against abortion, but I'd like us to have a discussion where we all have the same ethic at the beginning. Do we believe that all life is sacred? And if we don't, then we are going to lose our freedom down the road. And we're losing it now. I find it very disturbing that during COVID, we have people who are essential and non-essential. I'm sorry, who's non-essential? What human being is non-essential? What kind of language is that? What does that say about it? Well, it makes it so much easier to lock them up and destroy their businesses because they're just not essential.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I grew up in a small town too, Diane.
They really rolling.
Yes. Oh, no, I agree. And because we're seeing it here. So thank goodness there's a couple of rebels, as I'll call them, in Ontario. There's one in particular that's caught the headlines. That's the barbecue dude. So anyone who wants to check out that story, you can go to the ch1.ca website, and there's, more, that's more fleshed out there. So we don't need to go into the details of that, but people have got to stand up. This is part of the, first of all, the all life is sacred, that we have a divine responsibility to play out our role here also. So when we're called by Spirit to rally, it's our divine responsibility to rally and to fight for ourselves. And I don't mean be out there and having a Donnybrook or, a big scrap or causing havoc, but to be able to intelligently and purposefully have these conversations. And so thank you for the tools, first of all, Diane, because this is a tool for people to write it down and go, what do I actually believe about this? Do I believe that all life is sacred? So starting with this internal personal questioning, and then looking for the evidence of, well, are there other people that actually believe that all life is sacred? Who are they? And how are they behaving in life? And is that different than what I've been doing? And to your point, if people haven't been raised this way, I was very fortunate to be raised in a small town on a farm where it's a very small community of 1,200 people. And I was on a farm, so even smaller.
Don't go to church, but people aren't going to church anymore. And please note that during COVID, the worst place you could go was church, but you could go to Walmart. I mean, when a human being hears that, there has to be something going on in their head going, this doesn't make sense. That I can go to Walmart and I won't get COVID there, but if I go to my church or my synagogue, I will. So we're destroying the concept of teaching community and care. And the Judeo-Christian ethic is not just rights, it's responsibilities. Mm-hmm. They go together. You can't have one without the other. Whereas these entitlement ethical states are, it's all about me, my rights, no responsibility. I just have rights. So when COVID attacked churches, it was shocking. I don't know if your people watching this heard about this, but there was a church group who decided to have their service at Walmart.
Yes.
They went into Walmart as shoppers. They stayed there 6 feet away. Mm-hmm. And their pastor had gone in first. And I think it was at 10 o'clock in the morning, he started a service in Walmart. I mean, I thought that was the funniest thing and the brightest and the most, what a great thing to do. Well, I can't have my service at church, but I can have it at Walmart.
Absolutely. And we see that. So there's a couple of sides of that I've seen just from the, global perspective is there's people who have been calling out other faith leaders for not standing up, for not insisting that the services continue, like that they continue to have their groups get together, and that they have become so dependent on government subsidies and government infiltration, and even the members of their parishes or whatever whatever their construct is, the members are the same people who would be writing their paychecks. So they don't want to upset the members who are making this the political indoctrination. So they don't want to lose their money supply for building their great big churches, and so they are not insisting on having their people get together because they don't want to lose their funding. And this is a problem. And we also see now this month in December with the birth of Christ, where lots of people, that would be a normal time to get together, is very threatened. Can you speak into that?
Yes, I'm appalled that the government chose think it was April, May, June, to shut down everybody so that anyone trying to make a living was finished for the spring shopping time.
Yes.
Passover and Easter, you couldn't be with friends or family.
Mhm.
And now of all the times to shut down, you're shutting down right over Christmas when people should be coming together, because Christianity, there are 2 billion Christians in the world. And you're telling 2 billion Christians that they cannot come together to talk about a rather important event in Christianity. But you can go to the casino, I think.
Yeah.
I know you could go to the SCBO. For Americans, that's where we buy our alcohol. You can get cannabis. Those stores are open.
Right.
And I got notified that the sex shops are open.
Yes. I
You
wouldn't
can't
know
get
that.
COVID there. This is absolutely necessary to maintain your your sense of being, but going to church, not so important. So we're going to just shut that down.
Okay.
We have a value system that's been turned upside down and
Mhm.
inside out. And ultimately we have to ask, why? Why are you destroying religion? And the answer is because it's the ethic that gives everybody equal opportunity. That's why. You cannot be a tyrant when
Mhm.
everybody believes that they are equal, even if life isn't treating them that way. If the belief is that our fundamental belief system, the ethic underpinning our constitutions, states that we are equal, then we have to live that towards that. We have to have policies that help people be equal and that we protect all life. And we're not going to be doing it. We're not protecting life now with what we're doing with COVID, and we're destroying life.
Yeah. Can you be a little bit more microscopic on that? How do you see that? Because a lot of people will say, I'm staying home to protect grandma. I don't want to kill grandma.
Okay, I agree. We know from the very beginning that certain people were far more vulnerable, and it was the elderly. And I would say that if you have a family member that you worry about, I think it's a great idea to protect them the way you think it's best, having discussed it with them. I agree. But
Mhm.
and you should. I mean, if you care about
Yes.
your family, you make rules about your family, you make decisions about your family. But what about people that are basically healthy and aren't dying from COVID? Because my understanding is 99% of people who get COVID recover. And the people, the working generation, the young people, they're not getting that sick, which isn't to say they're not dying, because that would be lying. But if we do what we're told to do, if we're told to put on our masks, stand 6 feet apart, and wash our hands, then why can't I do it in my small business? Why can't I do that in church? I mean, if you have a huge church, then you'll have 2 different services. But why are you making it impossible for us to live a complete life, a whole life? Why are you, the government, deciding what's important and what isn't? Because I didn't elect you to decide that for me. But I do feel that if people are afraid, then it's their right. They've been given the right to stay home. Stay home. You're going to be given money to stay home. Our government is doing everything to help you do what you think is right, except let those of us who want to go out, go out.
Yeah. So starting with those fundamental, the all life is sacred, and having those conversations in your family is the
Right.
first step. But and then putting all the guilt on other people about
Right.
how they're living their life is a fear tactic. So what do you think about people snitching on their neighbor?
That reminds me of the brown shirts of Nazi Germany. I'm appalled that we snitch. That's a government like China and Russia. They're taught in China and Russia to snitch. It's every day in their life. Like, they don't know not to do it. So we're teaching young people, especially, to snitch.
And it's propaganda. It's done through propaganda. So I was just watching this movie, One Child Nation, and went, oh my gosh, it's so over there. They have signs spray painted on the sides of buildings, and set, like, just, it's every day. And even in how they do their operas, their musical productions, their TV shows are all about, what doesn't it make a great family to have one child? And then a
Right.
little kid saying, and if you have more than one child, you're going to get punished. And a
Right.
little one, 5 or 6 years old. And so
That's right.
we're seeing this kind of propaganda coming out with, I saw recently a little girl on a Christmas commercial, and she had a little, like a zebra, toy stuffed zebra, and like a little menagerie set on the table, and it's like a big elf's workshop with the elf sitting on the side, adult elf sitting on the side,
Right.
watching her, this little girl playing. And she says, you need to take your vaccine, to the zebra, and has the needle in her hand. And then she, she's playing a little bit more, and then she knocks the zebra over, like punches it, and says, well, that's what's going to happen to you if you don't agree to take it.
Right.
And then laugh. And then she picks it back up, when she's doing her thing. But it's this insidious indoctrination about that kids are doing to one another, and that adults are doing to one another also. It's like this, the vaccine's either going to save everybody and we can all get back to work, or it's the mark of the beast, so we've got these very divergent things.
I think what I find upsetting about the concept of the vaccine, and I'm a pro-vaccine girl, I was the first cohort for the oral polio vaccine. I think that they should make it available, and that people who want it, by all means, go and take it. I have no doubt there'll be more than enough people taking the vaccine,
right,
combined with people who've been exposed to COVID, to give us herd immunity. But what I find tyrannical is the idea that if you don't take the vaccine, you won't get a card that says you've had it, and you won't be allowed to go out. You won't be allowed to go to big events. You won't be allowed to go on a plane. No one asked me for my measles vaccine to get me on a plane. And if we have the COVID vaccine and we have herd immunity, what is this idea now of everyone, show me your papers? What do you mean, show me my papers? And if I don't have the vaccine and I'm on the plane or the train or at the big event, I might get COVID. Well, that's me. I might get COVID, but you're not going to get it from me because you've had a vaccine. So it's this constant dripping away or slicing away at our freedom to do what we think is best for us and our family. We know with people who don't vaccinate their children that if measles breaks out in the school, your children have to leave school. You can't be there. So if there's a big COVID outbreak, then I guess those of us that haven't been vaccinated will have to stay home. But it's this constant government imposition on our personal freedoms. Now, it's true, your personal freedom can't go so far that you hurt somebody else. Like, I think, how much freedom can I have? Well, right, you can't go running down the street naked. You have freedom, but we sort of have a rule that your personal right to run down the street naked, it goes against everybody's concept of modesty. We've agreed on that. Yeah. So what we have to decide is my right to take the vaccine or my right not to take the vaccine. How did it get to be a government imposed event when no other vaccine has been treated that way? And COVID has killed only, it's a lot. When I say only, people think, well, don't they matter? 2 million lives were lost from COVID. And that's sad. But 600,000 people died from cancer in America in 1 year. That's sad too. And how many people died from hunger? Is that not sad? So how did we decide that COVID was the most important event or illness in our world, that we needed tyrannical rules to tell us how to live?
Yes, and let's mention how many people have died worldwide because of the repercussions of the shutdowns. And again, it's like the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, scientists have gone on, and said, we didn't anticipate this amount of poverty. Well, of course you guys didn't anticipate it, because you get a paycheck, you're, wealthy, and you've never missed a meal. And I said, and I did a little swearing, I said, you fat. Because I'm like, the guy who's given the thing has never missed a meal. That's for sure. Right. So they don't.
the next question is, how is it in such an important position of power
Yeah.
that you didn't notice the grand scheme? How did you not know when so many people who aren't at the WHO or the UN or any of these organizations, they all called it out? I understand that the children aren't getting polio shots in Africa. So they're going to die from polio. Polio, people don't realize this or remember it. Polio was a terrible, terrible illness. People who died, children in the lung, what did you call it? Where they had the iron lung,
The iron
sorry.
lung? Yes.
Right? People whose bodies were distorted from it. This wasn't some tiny little event, but we made it through. And yet with COVID, we're shutting everything down. And we're not taking into account the millions upon millions of people who are going to suffer from collateral damage.
Well, and who have suffered. So it's not it's like future tense means like somehow people can hold this stuff external. Oh, well, it's going to happen in the future. No, folks, this is happening now. It's been happening since March. It's been escalating worldwide. And when the snowball starts rolling down the hill, I'm sorry for those of you who don't live in snow covered places, because it's hard to actually get that analogy, but maybe there's another analogy if you've got sand around, I'm not sure. But how snow works is that if you start with a little ball of snow and it's one little, ball of snow, then you start it rolling down the hill and the snow picks up more snow as it goes down. And then all of a sudden the snowball can take out a, train car track because it's so big and so heavy. And it's like, oh, I wish I would have stopped that snowball at the top of the hill. But this is where we're at right now, right? Is like,
and if I could, I'd like to bring this back around again because we're talking about the sanctity of life and our culture, our Western culture. You asked about Western culture. Western culture is based on common shared stories. We've been telling these stories for 3,000 years. They've been spread around the world and landed in places that became democracies. Those stories become part of our shared education, our memories, our culture, our ideals, and our expectations. I'd like to tell you what Alistair McIntyre wrote this. Man is in his actions and practice, as well as in his fictions, essentially a storytelling animal. It is through narratives that we begin to learn who we are and how we are called on to behave. Deprive children of stories, you leave them unscripted, anxious stutterers, and their actions is in their words. So if we do not give our children common shared stories that keep us all together, then they won't be able to go forward and develop and share those stories to keep us as a community and a society. And I'd like to ask, if the stories of the Bible, if that ethic is not the best, then tell me what is. What story shall we share to be a compassionate person, a compassionate society in a compassionate world?
Very good point. And people can answer that. You guys know you have my email. So if you have answers to these questions, this is supposed to be part of a dialogue. Also, the idea is to get people to think and then to answer. So part of education is about answering the question and, writing down your answer and neurologically kind of wiring it in there about, okay, well, how would I answer that? What would be something better to read? When I look at my bookshelf, what do I have? Or on my Kindle, have I been reading the latest, romance novel of, or whatever, or have I actually got something in my wheelhouse that is, and on my library shelf, that's something that is informing me about how I want to construct my life on this planet. And you're right about the lessons in the biblical stories. There is so much to learn in the first few chapters. I remember reading lots of, so what are other things that people may have read that would allude to, biblical stories that they might, be able to easily bridge and go, oh yeah, I remember reading, I don't know, Aesop's fables or who knows, other contextualized things.
Well, let's talk about free will, because free will is the underpinning of a democracy. You have to be able to voice your opinion. It's not just that it's free will, you have to use it. It's not just there. So you got Adam and Eve in the garden, and God said you could have everything you want, anything, except not that tree. That tree right over there, right there in the middle of the garden, you can't touch that tree. Mm-mm-mm. Well, by gosh, by golly, Eve got around to touching it thanks to the serpent. She convinced Adam, and of their own free will, they ate of the fruit of the tree, and they had to leave the garden. And so begins the story of the importance of free will and how you use it. So that to me is one of my favorites, is that, right, and if they hadn't eaten the apple, the Bible would have ended after 90 lines. It would have been, that's it.
End
And
of
the
story.
story of humanity would have been over. But we have free will. And then when people look at the commandments, I talk about the second half of them, the ones about don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't commit incest, don't murder. The most important one now is do not gossip. The last one is not covet. We're having trouble maintaining those 5 commandments. We can't even get a handle on those 5 that we're asked to follow. And particularly today, the one about gossip should be at the top of our minds, because we are destroying people on Facebook and social media. We are attacking people that we never see. We're destroying their lives. We're canceling them by accusing them of anything and everything. And the one thing in the Bible that we were told not to do, don't gossip. And here we are, full force, because we have social media making it so much easier. And once a lie is out there, you can never get it back.
Right.
There's the story of the rabbi telling a child to cut open a feather pillow and shake all the feathers out. They fly. And he said, that's good. That's really good. Now I want you all to go outside and collect every feather. Well, you can't. Right. And that's gossip. It's out there. You'll never get it back. We are harming ourselves with gossip. We're harming ourselves with cancel culture because we're not holding on to that ethic. We're not remembering that we are part of a continuum and we learn from the past. If you get rid of all of the statues, all of the books that you thought were improper or were actually racist or homophobic or misogynistic, well, if you don't keep them to know this was what was wrong, this is where we came from, but this is where we're headed, then you can't improve because you don't know what was. And we're allowing cancel culture to cancel that very basic ethic of ours about time.
Yeah.
I can give you one more, though, from the Bible.
Yes.
One more.
Yeah.
Jeremiah, the prophet. And I'm going to do this because it's about freedom and free speech. So Jeremiah was called upon by God to bring the people back to the ethic, to do the right thing. And he would give speeches. And he was in this town giving a speech telling them how terrible you're behaving, how wrong you are from the top down. And there were cries, kill him for saying these things. And the other leaders came up and said, well, you may not like what he said, but you really need him because he has the right of free speech. Free speech comes from the Bible, as does free will and freedom.
Beautiful. So think about what you're going to do in our last couple of minutes. I always invite the audience, always to think about what is it that you're going to take away from this? What is it that you could implement and do in your own life right now? So again, it's this idea that somebody else politically is going to A, take care of you, and B, make the rules. And then you're going to live your life within the construct of those rules. So we've got some really real life things that are opportunities for people to decide from their sentient wisdom and their divineness, how they're going to behave. And this does affect you for the rest of your life. When you know something, you can't not know it. So when you know that it would be the right thing to be getting together with your family, and you're not doing that because you're operating at the pleasure of somebody else, at the behest of somebody else, at the beguiling of somebody else, at the threat of somebody else, you've already subjugated yourself away from God's teaching. You've taken yourself and you've sliced yourself off. So when you're looking at your family and you're making decisions about how you're going to connect and take care of one another, part of it really is looking at the system that you're operating in and deciding how you're going to move in it in an honorable way, in a noble way, and in a Christed way, right? And to not just be operating at somebody else's threat or to please somebody else. So especially around this holiday season, when it's the normal thing would be, or when people are not well or whatever it is, how are you going to handle that in your community? Like if you're locked down, are you still getting together? If you've got compromised immune system or whatever, and it's worse for you to wear a mask, why are you doing that? And you need to ask yourself these questions and not to just say, well, I'm doing it because somebody told me that I should. Because in China, that was the response to all of this one-child nation killing hundreds of thousands of babies. The answer to that was because I was told to do it. I didn't have a choice. And so we're sitting here at that crossroads right now. People say that all the time. Why are you wearing a mask? Well, I don't have a choice. Why are you, why are you not going to visit your family? Or what, but I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. I hear that all the time. So can you speak into that a little bit, Diane?
This is a difficult event to talk about free will and freedom, but I will. I really do believe that the government is worried about COVID, and they believe that if you wear a mask, stand 6 feet apart and wash your hands, we'll be fine. But if you get together, I don't understand why you cannot get together 50 people with a mask on. Like the point is does the mask work or not? If the masks work, then I should be able to get a large group of people wearing masks. But apparently you can't do that either. I think it's important for everyone to decide for themselves what science they're going to read. I have read a great deal of science that suggests that we can get together, and that is not the cause of the spread. There are many scientists who have not been allowed on Facebook or Twitter because they differ from the government statement. I think it's important that you consider the lives of others. Yes. If you're worried about your family, then you should do everything in your power to not spread your air.
Right. Just like we would have done any year prior to now. This is what I want to, just any family that was ethical, any year prior to now would have looked at each other at the holiday season and gone, you know what, I don't feel that good. I think I'm going to stay home.
Right.
Or I'm coming out, or grandma's not feeling that great. She's going to.
The other thing too, Lita, that I understand this is, let's say you decide to get together and you take a chance and someone gets sick.
Yes.
Well, then someone will say, we told you not to do that. It is the fear of making a mistake, right, which we all, it's the fear of not listening to your mommy and getting into trouble. But I fear that how we handled COVID, because of the basic premise underneath it all, that some people were essential and some people were not. And when that is where you begin, then your decision-making will be much different than if we begin with everybody is essential. How could we help everybody live essentially? But we didn't. And we don't seem to care about the people who've lost everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's almost as bad as getting COVID.
Right. I think it's probably worse than getting COVID by a long shot. COVID you recover from. Anyway, so we're out of time. Sorry, Diane, but I just want to give you a moment to talk about how do people get your book. So this might be good for people who are doing some holiday shopping, or they're going, oh man, how do I educate myself? Or how do I want to have conversations with my family if I've never heard this before? And I'm thinking, I want to be one of the ones who puts my hand up to understand more about this ethic. Where do people get your work?
You can go to Amazon.com or any other bookstore, and you could order it online from, it's called Back to the Ethic, Reclaiming Western Values. The publisher is Mantua, which I'd like you to know is the only publisher in Canada who publishes conservative writers, the only one. I also have another book that came out last year. I'll show it to you.
Great.
Called The Serpent and the Red Thread, The Definitive Biography of Evil. It's 3,000 years of the history of Jew hatred in 100 pages.
Wow, a quick read. But, and I say that all joking aside, because people need things that they can ingest quickly and then go, oh, it's like that actually has sparked some more inspiration for me to chase down some more information about it. Thank you, Diane, so much for your insight, intelligence, and inspiration for this episode of Master Your Life. And everybody, love yourselves, realize your value. You're such a precious, beautiful, divine person, being that is here, and you're here on purpose and for a purpose. You're perfect. And in our imperfection, in our perfect imperfection, we're all figuring things out. So give yourself space to do that right now, though. Really do give yourself a break from the things that are leading you down the path that are not awesome. And you know what they are. And so this is a rally call to everybody to go, how do I actually make myself be this refined, shiny, beautiful being that I know that I'm intended to be? Do that. All right. Love you guys. Love each other. Mind your minds. That's all for us. Bye for now.